Press too many buttons there. Good afternoon, everybody. It's Amplifying Muted Voices, and it's a special issue. This particular podcast issue is Amplifying Muted Voices South Asian Heritage Month, and it's our chai time. And I've got a little brew in here. I've got some fabulous guests for you. My name's Cllr Whitehouse, for those of you who don't know who I am. And I just want to sort of share about South Asian Heritage Month. It runs every year from the 18th of July to the 17th of August, ending on the anniversary of the partition. The Indian Independence Act received royal assent from the King George IV on the 18th of July, 1947, and the Radcliffe Line, which divides India, West Pakistan and East Pakistan, was published on the 17th of August by Cyril Radcliffe. And the countries that are involved in that, in the South Asian Heritage Month, is Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Now, forgive me if I've missed any off, but those are the ones I've got there. And I want to quickly introduce our first guest. I'm going to get her to introduce herself, but all I can say is because we've had the football on, it's been, my thing's going really weird. I've got her name here. And see, she's live from Morocco. So we're going to see if we can get her through. There you are.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Hello. Amna Abdullatif is here. She's live from Morocco. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Boiling, but great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't introduce you fully because I want you to do that. It says it on your lower third that you are co-founder of the Three Hijabis, but there is so much more about you than that. Vital Voices visionary, and you're an EDI consultant as well. I know you as Chancellor.
Yeah, so I'm an independent councillor representing the ward of Ardwick in Manchester City Council. So that's kind of one of the main hats that I wear.
Excellent. So tell us about your journey and a tip to the hat to the Three Hijabis and how that came about.
Yeah, God, I don't know where to start really about a journey. I think in terms of the political context of my journey, I was very involved in my local community. I worked as a youth worker in South Manchester. That then led me into lots of spaces with councillors in Manchester City Council. I got to know a lot of them and all of the great things that they do in their local communities, and started to get people asking me why I wasn't thinking about becoming a councillor myself, considering the work that I was involved in and was doing at a local level. I was essentially asked, I was asked by the deputy leader at the time if I'd considered it and whether I'd have a meeting with him to discuss, what it would take to get into council. And I agreed, partly because I gave him a bit of a bashing in a public event, challenged him on some things that he was saying, and his kind of commentary to me was that they needed more women who were passionate, who were doing the work and were willing to use their voice to challenge things when things didn't sound right, when things didn't look right. So I was like, okay. And part of the reason why I was never really particularly interested in party politics was really about, feeling like you have to toe a particular line. And that kind of kept me out of it. But I thought, well, if they're looking for a challenge, if they're looking for somebody who's, comfortable voicing their opinion, then I'm more than happy to do that. But, he walked me through a lot of the process, which is essentially how then I ended up getting involved in politics.
That's brilliant. And so I know you're an independent and you were part from another party as well. But what people you need to realise is because you're a councillor, because you talk politics, you're not a monolith. Mm-hmm. There is something else besides that empowered you. But then what happened is it became a Venn diagram, and you know where I'm going with this because we've just had the big football. Was it the Euros? I've got no idea.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was the Euros, which is it was interesting, this Euros, because it felt like a repetition almost of the last Euros, which happened in was supposed to happen in 2020, but because of COVID took place in 2021, and that's what launched the Three Hijabis. It was essentially a tweet that went viral that talked about how the England team under the leadership of Gareth Southgate had started to change, become much more inclusive, that for the first time many people of colour were feeling connected to the England team in a way that they hadn't done before, partly because of the kind of the racism that was always associated with the game and so forth. And that had started to shift, particularly in the Black Lives Matter movement had taken place, and lots of the players were taking the knee even though they were being booed at every game. And what they did and what they managed to achieve in the last Euros was incredible, getting us to the final, to play against Italy, which is a huge, big achievement considering that they hadn't been doing very well at all for decades. And this year was exactly the same, getting to a final. Thank God no penalties, because I think all of us would have just dropped from heart attack if it did end up going to penalties. But what happened obviously in that last Euros was lots of racist abuse towards the three Black young players who had missed penalties. And we decided to then do with the platform that we'd created and generated as the Three Hijabis was launch a petition which essentially went viral. It got over 1 million signatories within the first 48 hours, and it was calling on racists to be banned from football, for government to take a stand and the extension of banning orders of racist fans, but then also for the Football Association to also take more care about how they then deal with these issues, especially in relation to kind of the trauma that they cause for those young players. And many of us who watch and see much of the racism that we experience day to day being kind of presented in this really national scale. And I think we saw some of that in this, when Saka scored in the penalties in the quarterfinals in this Euros, he made commentary to the fact that this was to kind of make up for the loss of the penalties in the last Euros. And I think lots of people assume that these things will just go away. If you're rich and, you've got money and you've got this talent, then, you don't maybe necessarily care as much about the impact of this. But racial trauma is so insidious, and it sits with us for the rest of our lives. And so it was kind of really empowering just to see him speaking up about that and the impact of that, and for us to kind of really understand more about his experiences and the other players' experiences too.
It's vitally important. And I think you would have probably gone down that route, even if you were not a counsellor, because this had nothing to do with it. But at the same time, it still took you to a path where you try to, you're working towards changing the way things are. You're changing, you're looking at policy.
Yeah, I mean, all of my work has revolved around really big issues. I started my career, like I said, as a youth worker. I then went on to working around children's rights and domestic abuse. And then my work took me on to kind of more children's rights issues around equalities, and then went back into kind of anti-racism work within the women and girls sector with rape crisis. And, now much more consulting work, but also campaigning work, because I think campaigning and protest works. That's how we've created a lot of the change that we've seen around us. And, Manchester is a really exemplary example of actually how protest has changed so much of our rights as citizens. Our women's rights started as the suffragette movement here. The union movement has shifted our workers' rights in this country, and that started in this city. And so, for me, that the right to protest, the right to campaign, to really voice those concerns, to challenge. That's the only way that then we create that really considerable change that we want to see in policy. And essentially, what policy does is that it changes our lives, how we live our lives, and how the lives of other people are impacted. And they don't necessarily have to be issues that I'm impacted by. That's not the point of, the work that we do. It's about, is it impacting somebody's life, and should we be doing something about it in order to shift that? And I think that's the important thing. And that's the thing that I've really learned in my council life, is that there are so many things that you don't recognize are really happening, but people are experiencing them. And it's important for us to be aware. But more than that, it's important for us to act in order to change people's lives.
That's a vitally important point about it might not affect you, or you might not be an expert by experience by it. But that's the thing about being a counsellor, being in that position, is taking that particular subject and championing it for the individual. And I think that's great. We met within the campaigning arena. That's how we first met.
Troublemakers found each other.
Exactly, about 6-7 years ago, I think it was now. I think it was because I met quite a few wonderful women, including yourself, in the 100th anniversary campaigning of women getting the vote in the United Kingdom, aged 30 plus. So, and that was a great year for me to meet people like yourself. I'm going to pop you back in the green room, and I'm going to get our next guest out, and I'll see you later. Thank you so much, Amna.
Oh, thank you.
That was great. Whistle stop through. My next guest, I'll do a quick introduction with my next guest. Not know my next guest long, but I think we'll be firm friends for quite some time. Now, Sumaiya Afzal OBE, she is also funded by the Rosa Fund. We are parallel in this campaign. And I'm going to get her out to talk a little bit about. She's one of the Northern voices, one of the Northern women that amplifying loud and proud. Amna, are you there? Yeah. Yes, you are. Not so far away. Yeah. How are you doing?
SAIMA. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you. It's been brilliant. Have you noticed the zebra or zebra?
Yes. Yes,
connection?
I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. Everyone else take note. Right, okay. Right, you've got an MBE. Afzal, you are not related to one of our champions and our university chancellor, Nazir Afzal, no?
I know him very, very well, but not related, not married, nothing.
Right, okay. All right. Well, tell us about your journey.
Okay, you've obviously, thank you for the wonderful introduction and the invite to speak as one of the Northern voices. You'll probably see the title there, MBE SAIMA Afzal Solutions. That's kind of the private arm, my activism work. But as you've already mentioned, through Rosa, we have been funded via the community interest company I set up because for over, I would say at least 10 decades. Sorry, I'm not that old. 3 decades, 30 years. I have been trying to raise the issues of women from particularly minoritized backgrounds, South Asian communities, and also, this is a controversial part, the religio-cultural dynamics of what happens to women and when are we sometimes, yes, allowed to be in the public domain and sometimes not. And what are those factors? And should it be like that in the UK? And I know you asked us to think about inspiration, and my inspiration, partly, not completely, but there were many inspirers, including my mum, who enabled me to think for myself and speak for myself without fear. It's Benazir Bhutto. When I see a prime minister in Pakistan, I'm thinking, that's a woman. Why can't women in the UK, in my hometown of Blackburn, stand? So my activism journey began as a result of experiencing a forced marriage. In those days, they didn't call it that. It wasn't recognized as that. I would raise the concerns, and I found this disparity in how women from South Asian communities were dealt with. We were told it's a cultural issue. But if my counterpart, white British women, went to the police, they would be dealt with, and it would be dealt with as a domestic abuse and so forth. I'm not saying perfectly, but nevertheless, it was at least acknowledged and not denied. And when it came to South Asian women, I'm sick and tired of hearing this to this day in 2024. Oh, let's talk to the community leaders. And community leaders of course, there's some wonderful leaders, and I don't want to discredit their work at all. Nazir Afzal, you mentioned, I have had a lot of work and support from Nazir in my policing work, which I can mention if you want me to later. But he's one of those allies who's helped not take over what we do, but actually take what we do, not deny it, and allow us to be at the forefront of leading that change. And so that, to me, is the difference between positive, progressive male allyship and men who come along, take what you've done, plagiarize it, present it as their own. Hey, they're the heroes now, and we just get lost and left behind. So
that happens across the board, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And so I'm not afraid to kind of call it out. So SAIMA Solutions was born out this frustration of how too many people were taking what I did in my voluntary capacity, because rightly or wrongly, I wasn't interested in finances at all. My mission was, we have to have the truth. We can't be silenced by virtue of power, patriarchy, and privilege, because I wasn't breaking the law. I wasn't saying anything untoward. I was trying to, if you would, enforce the law and also promote my faith in the way it should be promoted. So, when people associate forced marriage with just Islam, I absolutely challenge that in academia, in my lived practice. I don't deny how people abuse religious interpretations, because you cannot do that, because the reality is, when I'm speaking to women and they say, oh, I can't report rape because I can't classify it as rape because I'm married to this person, and that's not just Islam, that's Christianity, other faiths, whichever faith, we will call that out. Where actually rape is rape, according to the law. 1991, the laws came in, rape is rape, and there should not be a disparity in who is getting the support and who isn't getting the support, who is able to speak up, who isn't able to speak up. And I know previous guest Amna mentioned about racial trauma. There's a trauma amongst women themselves collectively, and there's an intersectionality of trauma that's not understood fully to this day. We don't debate it. We talk about stigma. We talk about why aren't more women in politics, and then women like myself, we go along to meetings, and I did get involved in politics. I don't know if I'm allowed to say which party for, you tell me if not, but I did. Back in 1994, I attended a meeting, was very vocal about the disparity, the male domination of what I was seeing across the board from all backgrounds. I said, where is the voice of the women? Where is the voice of the woman who's not prepared to conform to regressive norms? And I raised those issues. And again, I was asked, would you like to stand? I didn't think it through. And I said, yes, why not? And I found myself jumping out of the pan into the fire just to be subjected to a barrage of abuse, misogyny. I'd left the forced marriage at that point with the support of my family, which was misreported in the media. They continually blame the family as if, and that's another story for another day. But the point was trying to make that people are coerced at community levels. So community in quotation marks, you have to examine which community we're talking about. So I'm excluded. My family is supported of me. We're all labelled as something we're not. And me, and I hope I can say this, but my phone number is in telephone boxes. So I'm talking about 1994 now. So just pre-mobile.
Find a telephone box.
I didn't even have a mobile at that time. So my number is plastered across telephone boxes. She's a prostitute. She's available for, I was, men were turning up at my house. This was the kind of intimidation I was facing. I had leaflets when I stood for election that were ejaculated on and shoved through my letterbox that I just needed a good sorting out. I stood 3 times in Blackburn with Darwin, didn't win. And so I was the first Muslim South Asian woman to even attempt to stand. I didn't give up on politics. I thought, well, this is getting too, not difficult, but the processes are just not there. The environment is just not there for me to make a change through this avenue. So I entered into the policing route. I applied for a role as a police authority member, became the first independent member of a police authority, and subsequently acquired a role as a national equality, diversity, human rights lead for all police authorities. So 43 police forces, and the chief constables were around the table and I was influencing change. I hope certainly around the violence against women and girls agenda, hence the MBE. And then once the structures changed to police and crime commissioners, I did serve for 2 years as an assistant police and crime commissioner, and then stopped and then carried on working through privately and through the community arm, which Rosa funds, to explore what are the barriers that still in 2024 don't seem to have changed, or they've regressed. Where we did make progress, they've gone backwards. So whilst it's great to see 35% women in parliament now, I believe that was
after the 4th of July, it's a 41%.
Excellent.
Yeah, we smashed the 40% barrier.
Excellent. And what I want to know, and the question was, how many of those are from Muslim, South Asian backgrounds? Because, and I'm not into just identity politics. Let me just make that clear, because it's not just a skin tone. You know, and I know we've had this debate. You can be a Muslim woman, you could be a Black woman, a South Asian woman, and if you then deny the struggles of those communities, then hang on a minute. Are you there by virtue of skin tone, or by virtue of offering a perspective that helps to improve people's lives? And that's really what my mission is. And sometimes I'm unpopular, and actually sometimes I think, great, I'm unpopular with the right people. Fine. You know, I want to improve standards of public life. I want to make sure women are there and they can be authentic. And I think Amna, it's actually unfortunate that people feel that they have to categorize themselves as an independent. You know, that's how I view it, that why can't mainstream parties enable us or not deny us to have an authentic opinion? And so maybe there's room for reform within the mainstream parties, because standing as an independent is impossible in some areas to even get the support around you, to get the finances. So hats off to Amna for doing that and being elected as an independent. Absolutely. But at the same time, you know, my issue is around, how do we make sure, regardless of which party, political background you're from, whether you have a role, an elected role, are we coming together to make sure we make politics a more inclusive place, a more remove the toxicity. I can never say that.
Yeah.
The
toxicity and the misogynoir.
Yeah, and I was just going to come to that, the misogynoir, which is just not.
Well, you're running out of time, and to be honest, I could do one-to-ones with every one of you, but you're running out of time. But what I want to take from this is the fact that your journey as expert, and most of you expert by experience, has led you to key things that have affected change. Absolutely. They have affected change, and you've had a seat at the table where sometimes someone who looks like yourself or myself would not have a seat at the table. And that's the trajectory, and that's the journey that we shouldn't give up. And the disgusting things that you mentioned, that you had to mention to prove a point, is now happening more or less to Kamala Harris.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Presidential candidate of the United States. Okay. So me saying that will date this podcast, but it doesn't matter, because the date of this podcast is the 24th of July, 2024. And, you know, inshallah, God willing, she, you know, hopefully she gets to the top spot. But at the moment, they're trying their best with that. And it takes a lot of backbone, thick-skinned, to be able to forge ahead and move forward. Well, I salute you, SAIMA, and we'll come back another.
Yeah, we will have another time. I did get elected in 2018, only to then have to remove myself in 2021. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, let's, you know, these
another conversation.
You know, because it's 50-50 Parliament, because it's Rosa, a wide spectrum of people will watch this, and hopefully it will be a chink of catalyst for change. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Our Wi-Fi is really iffy here today, so forgive the slowness. Right. Our next guest is my wing woman, my 50-50 Parliament wing woman. Yes, it is the wonderful Bushra Ahmed. Bushra, are you there, my hun? Yes, she is.
I am indeed.
You are. Hello, how are you?
Honestly, fascinating to hear your guests. Love hearing you speak. And thank you for inviting me to be here.
No problem, no problem. Exactly a week ago, was it a week ago today? We were together on the roof.
Oh, yes.
Yes, the state opening of Parliament Day in Westminster. We weren't invited, but we were at a satellite event on the roof welcoming new female MPs into Parliament, which was great to do, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was really wonderful. It was such a great event. And I think it just goes to show the excitement around, having more female MPs in power, and imagining what change they're going to bring about just by being there in dint of numbers,
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So please, Bushra, tell us a little bit about your journey, because you are like everyone that I've invited, really, you are a disruptor for good as well. You're not a councillor, but you are a trustee of 50/50 Parliament, and yeah, you're a disruptor of good. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my journey is a little different. I came into politics much later in life, through a tragedy, if you like. So it changed my life when I was 50 in 2011, when the riots happened. I was living across the road from my shop, which was a laundrette and dry cleaners. I had run that for 25 years. It was a family shop. And on that night of August the 8th, stood there and watched people burn it down. And they burnt it down while the police were standing in a line watching them do it. So, the effect that had on me, the trauma of that break in trust, if you like, with the police who are supposed to protect you, and then allowing them to set fire to shops with people still in them. So based on that, then obviously it was a family business. It was an income for the family. So immediately after that, it was said that we were owed compensation. So as victims, there were 9 shops and 40 flats that had burnt down. All of us very diverse. Not many people had the voice. So to be able to challenge or go to these meetings or talk about what had happened. And if we're talking about amplifying muted voices, that's exactly what I had to do. So I labeled myself as West Croydon Voice, just to be seen in those rooms as somebody being there, so that people would get used to me. Because if I went into the room like this, sometimes I would just completely be ignored. But having said that, here I am, West Croydon Voice, eventually people got used to the fact that, okay, she's from, that she's from the riot victims kind of voice, amplifying that in the rooms. And, and I had to raise awareness of what had happened to people who had lost everything, leaseholders who had lost their flats, who still had to pay their mortgages, who then had to also pay for somewhere to rent. And all of this was going on within a narrative that everybody's been paid and we hadn't been paid, and we couldn't move on with our lives. So I had to go to all the meetings. I used media. They started coming down, and so I was using the media to amplify those voices. And it took me 3.5 years, but eventually we got the compensation, which was millions of pounds actually brought into the area to regenerate the area as well, because that whole area was destroyed. And I was able to be successful in that, and we've now the area is regenerated. And actually, I was part of the campaign also to rename the area as Historic Broad Green Village, because when the riots happened, after that, we had a secondary school that had come in, and we also had a new primary school that had come in. And because it was just known as the area where the riots happened, we wanted to actually bring community together in calling it a village. Of course, Croydon's very urban, but the fact is it had been a village 50 years ago. And so we were like, village is about community, and we needed to bring that community back together and give the children who are now in this new secondary school a sense of pride of being in the area, rather than just having this label of, the riots hanging over them. yeah, that's how I started.
Gosh, see, I didn't, all of that, I mean, I know you, but I didn't know a lot of that. And to see, you know, there's experts by experience, and to see your business burn down like that, and then trying to have the heart to build it back up. But, you know, you were raising a community at the end of the day. And so I know you're on several boards and you are making a difference in that way as well. What have you found beneficial from being part of 50-50 Parliament?
I think 50-50 Parliament for me, I was always political. So I grew up in a political family. My father was a politician, and we had the Times newspaper every day. We talked politics. I didn't get to go to university because I was a young carer at the time for one of my parents. But I was avidly interested in books and reading and learning and all of that. So I've always had an interest in politics. And when I did come out into this journey out of, in fact, before this journey started, I had done some work with women from my community and integrating them into society here, because they'd come from abroad and had different expectations. Of course, when you are a migrant, as my parents were, you have rights, but you also have responsibilities. So I'd done some trips with some women, a group of 70 women at a time, taking them up to Parliament to actually show them the need to vote and to get involved in local politics, to get involved as, governors and in positions of power, to make that difference in their own communities and for their own children, so to be very involved. So I took 5 groups up of 70 women each time, and we were shown around the House of Parliament. And I also took a group of 100 university students up, I think it was in about 2008, to meet with Justine Greening at the time to talk about her experience of getting into politics. And I wanted to inspire those young people, because what I found was, when I was growing up in the 70s, because of the political nature of, what was going on at the time, we were a very political generation. So in my school, in my comprehensive, we were a very political generation, and we loved football because we were right next to Crystal Palace Football Club, which was, so, I love the fact that Amna's here today. It ties in with my love of football. But, so we were very political, but I found that the subsequent generations, they had lost that interest in politics and talking about politics, because it just wasn't there. Although they were very competent, very educated, but then the interest in, or seeing politics as a way of changing things. And I think we needed to change that. So I think 50-50 for me, when I was asked to get involved. Yes, I was already on the Bank of Lloyds, Lloyds Bank Foundation, which is the largest corporate in the UK. And I was working at Home Start with children, and I was doing some other work around women's empowerment, gender equality. I've done a lot of work around youth violence and stop and search to try and find solutions to the fact that, why did these young people, set fire to their own communities, if you like, and did a lot of work around that. But eventually, politics and campaigning is kind of in my blood. So I loved the chance to get involved and to support women who do want to get into politics. But there's also pitfalls. So from my journey, just stepping out into the community and speaking for my community as I saw it, because I was born and brought up in the area, I saw this as my community. I didn't just speak for Muslim women, I was speaking for everybody who had been affected. But because of the rise of Brexit and the hate crime, that was rising at the same time, the very nature of a Muslim woman speaking out for a community was seen as having, I was seen as having too much influence, because I was seen with the mayor or the council. And so that led to like a 7-year harassment, which is still ongoing to this day. But I had to kind of rise above it in a way, and kind of, I did have to eventually stop working in my local community, which was a shame. But in a way, it pushed me out to do things at a London level, pushed me to do things more at the national level. And now, for me, I'm working on the international stage, if you like. I went to Commission on Status of Women this year. I've just done a podcast on leadership and equality for UNESCO, which is also out. And, I'm focusing more on the bigger picture, if you like, and what we can do at a more national and global level.
Well, I'm going to have to wrap you up now, Bushra, but you see, I know that, there was sort of pressure and sort of moving you out, but at the same time, it shows you can do it, as in, you were there at the United Nations in New York and places like that. It does show that you can do it. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to bring the other guests back into the studio so we're all together, and including that, we're going to welcome Sumaiya Motara. One second, let's get everybody in. Oh, look at there. We're like the Spice Girls, but not. There's 5 of us.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
And welcome, Sumaiya. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Well, we want to. Have we all got our drinks so we can raise our cups, our chai? Let's raise our chai to Sumaiya. Do you know why we're raising our chai to Sumaiya? Yes, she's just graduated, first-class degree, University of Manchester, politics and international relations. Woo!
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a lot of hard work, to be fair.
And if you're on LinkedIn, there's some lovely photographs of you and your family that I put hearts on all over. Right, I said to you, I mean, I want us to sort of have a chat of what we've heard from each other. Amna, mentioned something about Sumaiya, Sumaiya, what she said, what Bushra said, and so on. I'd like you to comment on that. But remember, I asked you to think about somebody that you admired, and for me, and because it's South Asian Heritage Month, I'm going to say Safia Julip Singh. Now, I'm going to say that only because I'm a Pankhurst ambassador, and she basically supported the suffragette movement. And in 1910, she was part of the delegation of 300 suffragettes who marched towards Parliament in London, seeking an audience with the Prime Minister. I think it was Asquith at the time, to allow women to get the vote. And of course, women got the vote 8 years later. But she was quite a dominant figure, and it's just fantastic to have her. And now in the Pankhurst Centre, they do have a dedicated book on Princess Safia Julip Singh. So let me know who you admire.
I don't mind going first. I haven't got somebody in history, and partly because I think we always need to be celebrating the women that are around us that are changing the world as we speak. And for me, it's lots of the women that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm going to name my colleague and co-conspirator and co-troublemaker in the Three Hijabis, which is Chancellor Aziz, who's done incredible amounts of work on shifting lots of narratives across this country and globally. Women like Yasmin Dar, in terms of, my experience of her as, my career started in Youth and Solid Ground in South Manchester, which she was a trustee. She's founded that organization. They have made incredible difference to many young people's lives in Manchester. And, seeing her get to the stage of where she was the Lord Mayor last year, the first Muslim woman, the first Asian woman to hold that position. I think incredibly proud of, the achievement and just seeing her progress over the last decade or two. So for me, those are two women that I'm very close with that I think are not only have they changed the world, but I think will continue to create lots of ripples of change for future generations as well.
Yeah, I know both of them, so I totally agree with you. And any others?
I think I already mentioned Benazir Bhutto.
Benazir Bhutto.
as an inspiration to say, why can't I stand? Because when you've been told constantly you can't stand because it's not allowed, and then you see in Pakistan women in politics, and you think, hang on a minute, are you trying to pull the wool over my head? And in those days you didn't quite have internet, but I do recall when Benazir actually came to Blackburn, and I sat with her and spoke with her. So that and it was amazing, and I won't go into the detail because I can't remember the exact words, but I know it was it had the issue of misogyny, the challenges, they were there for even Benazir Bhutto. By the way, that's my cat meowing, not me. But my mum also is an absolute inspiration, because I am who I am, and I will say this over and over again and dedicate this, and I don't mean this in a kind of fluffy way. My mum is the bravest woman I know, who, I think Bushra mentioned you were driven out and you had to work outside of your town. And I had that experience. So I would have had to leave had it not been for my mum, who said, no, my daughter is better than any man. She will stay put. I don't care what you call her. She walked down those streets with me when nobody else could or would. But I understand trauma, and I understand why people disassociated. But yeah, so my mum will always be my hero. And one more hero, our co-director of S.A.S rights. She's based in Botswana and is dealing with, she's literally, she does research academia around violence against women and girls in Botswana. And that is some doing, when you can be shot anytime for doing that work. So, hats off to all our co-directors, but Mapula.
Yeah.
So I'll go next. I mean, for me, it's definitely my mum and the women of her generation, because my mum came over in 1959, and she brought up 8 kids in a country, no benefits, worked at home, very much cottage industry, against a backdrop of all of the racism that was absolutely out in the open at the time. And some of the stories that she tells about not being able to rent a place, with 3 children, and you're thrown out of a place and you have nowhere to go. The way that they worked, my mum and the women of her generation who came over and actually laid that trail for the rest of us to be who we are today. And also as a survivor of partition, because when my mum, I think, was about 10 or 12 when she took that journey, and she describes that journey in the rivers of blood from India to Pakistan, and doing that journey, being a trauma survivor, that then leading us to understand many of her behaviors much later in life, because, of course, nobody recognized trauma and how that affected the way that they kind of, then managed things. Incredibly brave, incredibly great women in managing with very little to bring up all of us, and to give us a decent education, and to keep us fed, and to inspire us to actually get the best for ourselves. So, education, really, really important. Even if you don't go to university, it doesn't matter. There's still that education side of things, And both of my parents actually passed away within 2 months of the riots, which was very sad for me, because they never saw they haven't seen the journey that I've been on. But this is all related to both of them, the work that I'm doing now.
Thanks, Bushra. And Sumaiya, you've had a listen to my 3 speakers here, and I hope they empower you because you're at the beginning of your journey. But have you got stuff that you want to share with us, and also, any influences in your life?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, apart from all of the guests here who have been incredibly inspirational, because I also want to go into a career in, social justice, social impact, and I feel like all of the women here completely inspire me to do that, just from listening to all of you. But then apart from that, someone that's really inspired me, she's an author. She's called Arundhati Roy. She wrote The God of Small Things, and she wrote Azadi. She's currently, I think, being prosecuted by the Indian government for her comments which, you know, when you talk about disrupting for good, I think she really champions that. She speaks up for Kashmir, she speaks up for Gujarat, she speaks up for like religious divides in India, for the caste system. And I feel like she's so inspirational for my political journey as an Indian woman as well. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And some of the stories that they've shared, is there anything that stands out? You know, are you into football?
I am into football. Yeah, I was, as well as probably everyone else who is an ethnic minority in Britain, I was kind of scared for the football players. I was really dreading repeat of the last Euros, where, you know, it was incredible to see incredible in a bad way, to see the racial injustice that was being shown to the four footballers. And so I'm really like inspired by Amna for championing, you know, racial equality against that. Yeah, but thankfully this year I feel like it has been so much more inclusive, which is good to see, I think.
Yeah,
we avoided penalties. I think that was the few. Like if anything, if nothing else, please, let's just, you know, you win or lose, just do not go into extra time, do not go into penalties. We do not need the same repeat. But yeah.
Well, 12 months after, more or less 12 months after setting up the Three Hijabis, I interviewed Amna on your Manchester TV. I don't know if you remember your Amna, and it was the women's. So of course you had like another campaign to do with the women's football. And at the time, I just found this very amusing. At the time, the interview was set, and so we were live. We were live. I think she had the TV on really low because it was just started. It was kickoff, and she just kept on doing this whilst we were being interviewed.
Yeah, it's like getting close to the goal. Oop, okay, nothing's happening yet. Yeah,
nothing's happening. Yeah. What was your question again, Caroline? Yeah. So that was really interesting. But you four are my amplifiers. Yeah. You four are my 50-50 amplifiers. I mean, Bushra's anyway. Bushra had no choice in the matter. I said, "Oh, you're doing this with me, Bushra." Right, but I want you to go out and spread the gospel, you know, empower women in a wave. I'm quite positive with this. You know, there are some negative stuff, yes, but I've looked at this July as the glass half full. As I started this July, 50 GM for Women 2028 event started on the 2nd of July and rolled. And through that, I wove the Amplifying Muted Voices, went to Liverpool, set up for the Liverpool event in September. There's going to be one in Leeds, connected with SAIMA, you know, and basically it's on a roll. This is a pilot, but I hope that we can take it further next year and have a synergy with SAIMA's campaign, but also as well other campaigns out there, because I want black and brown and you know, other global majority women in the North. And why do I say in the North? Because of the accent. Some of us have got this accent that, using a man as an example, so Lindsay Hoyle or Angela Rayner or whatever, it's nice to hear the accents in the council chambers, in the House of Commons, and that's what we need. It's representative of the country. Okay, it's, you know, the intersectionality needs to be championed. So what I want to say,
this is my posh voice. No,
yes,
you ever see me?
I try to do my Hyacinth Bouquet voice, but it does not work. But please stay with us. Amplify Muted Voices. Go out there and spread the gospel. And Sumaiya, I'm good. Your cat's great. What's your cat called?
I'm gonna just actually come here, Kit Kat. He's actually called Kit Kat. Oh, he's just run off. Sorry.
He's very vocal. He's very vocal.
Tiger. He's not
SAIMA, I want to know, are you available in November, Sumaiya?
I can be Sumaiya or SAIMA. Sorry.
Sumaiya, not you. Sumaiya, our graduate.
I am available in November. I should be, yeah.
Okay, all right. I shall message you. That's something I've got up my sleeve. something I've got up my sleeve. Right.
Makes sense to hear it.
You're curious now. Right, I want Amna to enjoy a holiday in Morocco. Have a lovely time.
Thank you.
Bushra, I'll see you in September face to face.
Yep, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yep. And SAIMA, we will speak again. But blessings to you all. Take care. And chai time.
Night time.
Shite
Everyone.
everyone. Do we go now, or sorry, are you still recording?